After World War II, Sweden's defense establishment started planning for the next decade, as a lot of nations were, and among the many conclusions was an identified need for a new strike aircraft to replace the B-18, which was a twin-engine prop bomber that they realized would quickly become obsolete as jet technology was maturing. Well, the engineers at Saab got to work on a number of different jet designs and recognized that some of them would be ready before others. What eventually became the Lansen family started as a single-engine jet that incorporated some German aerodynamic research that was imported from Switzerland after the war, but there were still a number of unresolved questions involving its engine and weapon systems as the design was evolving at the end of the 1940s. The specifications for the new jet were ambitious. Sweden wanted a plane that could reach anywhere along their borders within an hour of takeoff, which meant that the plane would need a combination of speed and fuel efficiency that was going to be difficult to achieve. Furthermore, new avionics would need to be developed in order to aid in navigation at high speeds. On top of this, the plane needed to be capable of operations in poor weather conditions and at night. It was that later requirement that arguably had the most influence on the design. The Saab J-32B Lansen's final design was a two-seat attack jet equipped with a radar set and a weapon targeting system that was fairly sophisticated for its day. The engine remained an issue, however, and original plans to use a domestically designed engine were scrapped in favor of the Rolls-Royce Avon. The first version of the Lansen was a dedicated strike fighter designated A-32A, which entered service in 1955. A few years later, when a requirement was posted for an all-weather interceptor, the Lansen was used as the base for the J-32B, which featured a weapon system set up for air combat, uprated engines, and some other minor changes. The J-32B entered service in 1958, with over 100 being produced before production ended in 1960. The interceptor version flew for Sweden until 1973. What we get in War Thunder is the J-32B Lansen, a jet fighter in rank 6 of the Swedish tech tree at battle rating 9.3. This jet doesn't get a ballistics computer or anything, but it does feature a double-mode PS-42 radar set. This radar actually uses two dishes, one for scanning and one for tracking, allowing it to continue scanning while it's tracking a target. Now, the overall performance of the radar isn't especially noteworthy, it's just an interesting feature. The jet's primary armament is a set of four 30mm Aiken cannons. Pretty typical selection of ammo, and my choice is generally the air targets belt. Loadout options include 4 pylons that can take air-to-air missiles or unguided rocket pods, but the rockets are only on the inboard stations. Speaking of which, its air-to-air missile is the RB-24. It's an AIM-9B. This is a caged seeker missile with entry-level performance, best used within 2 kilometers against targets that aren't maneuvering. When you get the J-32 up into the air, this is where the fun begins. The flight performance of this thing is excellent for its BR bracket. It accelerates quite well and has a really good rate of climb, especially compared to other subsonic jets. The key to this is the afterburning engine, which gives the J-32 really first-class performance. Now, despite its good engine power, the Lansen is still a subsonic fighter. It can safely break Mach 1 in a dive, but under normal conditions, it's going to top out at around Mach 0.9 to 0.93. It's still got a good top speed among other subsonic jets, but it can get tiered into stuff like F-104s and Su-7s, so that's just something to keep in mind. The energy retention is also pretty good, to the point that it can actually be a problem if somebody tries to force an overshoot from you. The air brake isn't very effective, so if you recognize that you're being set up, don't hesitate to just immediately go vertical and convert some of that airspeed into altitude. That brings us to the jet's agility, which is somewhat complicated. Now, the J-32 rolls like a champion, which makes for pretty effective defensive flying, and its overall agility is generally pretty good. As of making this video, it doesn't have the insane wing rip problems that it used to have, and I rarely ran into any situations where it felt like the plane's turn performance was holding me back in a fight, at least compared to most of its opponents. Dedicated turn fighters will still win a twisting dogfight against the Lansen most of the time, but if you don't screw up too bad, it's still possible to come out on top on a lot of one-on-ones. The last thing I want to mention is the fuel consumption. It's not as bad as some of the other low-tier afterburning jets, but you still want to keep an eye on it. And when it hits around the 6-minute mark, it's probably time to divert back to land. Just be safe and give yourself a little wiggle room for a defensive engagement on the way home. When this thing gets into air battles, you're gonna get a pretty good level of flexibility for different playstyles. My preferred mission profile with the Lansen is to use its good climb rate to start the mission up high, and then pounce on planes below me if I can't find anyone to engage with up at higher altitude. But you're gonna need to keep a watch out for stuff like the F-3H or MiG-21S that might have climbed up, since they might have semi-active radar missiles for you. Now, since the Lansen doesn't get any countermeasures, and really most of the jets at this BR don't, it ends up being pretty vulnerable to missile attack. The other risk for you is going to be an infrared missile coming up at you from below if you're flying up high. Remember, the afterburner on this thing is hot and easy to lock, so look down from time to time if you start up at higher altitude at the beginning of a match. Now, with all that out of the way, the jet is still pretty effective in air combat. It gets 4 missiles of its own, and the cannons hit pretty hard. The radar can occasionally be useful, and I lock targets mostly out of habit, but I do also like having an accurate closure rate indication. I already alluded to this a minute ago, but you're going to find the jet is a highly capable dogfighter. The strong energy retention, at least with the afterburners going, allows it to one-on-one a lot of potential opponents, and it can even do okay in a larger furball. I also want to mention that despite its lower top speed, the Lansen can occasionally engage the supersonic jets it goes up against. It won't redline until a bit over Mach 1, so if you climb early in a match, you can sometimes position yourself to dive in on a supersonic jet that's like running away from your teammates or something, and slot in behind them for a shot before your speed bleeds off. One notable shortcoming is that you tend to run out of cannon ammo pretty quickly. If you're like me, and really just can't aim for shit sometimes, this might mean more trips back to the airfield to rearm. But when the cannons on this thing do connect, the damage can be pretty serious. You do get 4 missile shots though, which isn't bad at this BR, and try to remember that the missiles don't really pull hard and are really easy to dodge. Don't be surprised if only half of your RB-24s connect, or maybe even less if you take riskier shots on maneuvering targets. Visually, the J-32 is kind of a weird-looking jet, and if I'm being honest, I'm really not too fond of it. Still, no big errors on the 3D model, and the silver paint job is pretty cool and goes really well with my decal, so that's not nothing. Landing this jet can be slightly tricky, as it can have a bit of trouble bleeding off the last bit of airspeed on final approach. The air brake isn't as effective as it could be, so it might be worth practicing. The gear can go out at around 450 kilometers an hour, but the flaps can only deploy at about 320, which is pretty low for a jet like this. Inside the cockpit, the visibility is great and you get a radar scope in a convenient spot, but it's a Shakemaster 9000 plane and it gets pretty bumpy at high speeds. If you get queasy in VR, it's something to be aware of. To close out on the J-32B. This jet has great engine power, it gets 4 missiles at a fairly low BR, and it's got a double mode radar set. However, it's still subsonic, its cannon ammo is a bit low, and no countermeasures. The final verdict on the J-32B Lansen is that with only a little practice, this jet can be a monster for air combat. If you're good with this thing, it might not be a bad choice to grind out a good chunk of the Swedish tech tree with. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this next one!